To declare two-dimensional array, as usual, first we have to write the data type, then array name, row size as well as column size. Inside one for loop, if you have one more for loop, then it can be called as nested for loop. If it is character data type, then it will occupy 1 byte of memory space. If it is integer, then it will occupy 2 bytes of memory space. If it is float, then it will occupy 4 bytes of memory space. Welcome back to One and All. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today, we will start with the second session of Arrays chapter. Whereas in the previous session, you have studied regarding introduction to array. What do you mean by array? How to represent that array? Then types of arrays. Under types of arrays, one-dimensional array, two-dimensional array as well as multi-dimensional array. Then with that you have studied regarding the declaration of one-dimensional array. How to declare one-dimensional array, then how to initialization of one-dimensional array, then how to access one-dimensional array elements, how to access one-dimensional array, how to read as well as how to print one-dimensional array. Regarding that you have studied. Whereas in today's class, you will come to know regarding memory representation of one-dimensional array as well as two-dimensional arrays, how to declaration of two-dimensional arrays and how to initialization of one-dimensional array, then how to access the elements especially in two-dimensional array. Now one by one we'll discuss. When we come on memory representation of one-dimensional array, what happens? We have continuous memory locations. For example, the first element position is 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, in the memory, if it is 5000, 5001, 5002, 5003, 5004. It means that here we are going to store the elements. All the elements we will store in that memory location. But when they come on the one-dimensional array, the elements of one-dimensional array are stored in a contiguous memory location. That means in continuous memory location, all the elements are stored. For example, consider the declaration char a of 5. It means that if it is character data type, then it will occupy 1 byte of memory space. If it is integer, then it will occupy 2 bytes of memory space. If it is float, then it will occupy 4 bytes of memory space. The elements of a of 0 is allocated at a particular memory location. The element of a of 1 is allocated at next memory location and so on. Since the array is one of the type char, each element represent or it requires 1 bytes of memory here. It means that in continuous memory location, only 1 byte of data memory, especially here, it will occupy. When you come on memory representation of one-dimensional array, consider the declaration int a of 3. Int a of 3 means totally we contain 3 elements, all the 3 elements of type integer and stored by the same name a. If it is integer, then it will occupy 2 bytes of memory space. Consider the first element occupies 2 bytes of memory. For example, 5000 and 5001 will be the first memory location element, and the second one will be 5002 as well as 5003. Then a of 2 memory location is 5004 as well as 5005. It means that if it is integer data type, then it will occupy 2 bytes of memory space. Whereas if you observe in previous slide, what happens? There we are declared as a character data type. Then for character, it will occupy only 1 memory byte of space here. But if it is integer, then it will occupy 2 bytes of memory space. The element a of 0 is allocated at a particular memory location. The element of a of 1 is allocated at the next memory location and so on. Like this, all the elements here it will store. But this array type occupies 2 bytes of memory space for each element here. When you come on this one-dimensional array memory representation, there the amount of storage space required to hold an array is directly related to its type and size of the array here. Then how many elements are there? Which data type it is? Depending upon that only we can able to calculate. The total size can be calculated using the formula total size equals size of type into size of array. For example, here the total size of char array requires is 1 into 5 equals 5 bytes. Because for char it occupies only 1 byte of memory space, whereas here 5 elements are there. For example, if you have integer data type int of 5, then how many bytes it will take? First for integer 2 into 5 here it will take. It means that the total size of an int elements requires is, for example, in this case we have 3 elements. That's why 2 into 3, totally 6 bytes of memory it will take. Whereas here it will occupy 10 bytes of memory space. By this, we can able to calculate the total size exactly on that array, how much it requires. It is an array in which each element is accessed using 2 subscript here. Compulsory we need 2 subscript here. The subscripts represent the position of the element in the array. For example, if we have int a of 2 is to 2, it is a 2-dimensional array. Then how to represent? Here we have totally 2 rows as well as 2 columns, row 1 and row 2. The first subscript represents the total number of rows, and the second subscript represents the total number of columns. For example, whereas in this case, we have 2 columns, column 1 as well as column 2. For example, if you have a of 3 is to 3. Here I am to give it as integer data type. Then how many elements here it can store? If you observe here, 3 rows are there, R1, R2 as well as R3. When they come on column, 3 columns, column 1, column 2 as well as column 3. Then how many elements it can store? Here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 elements it can store. Whereas in int a of 2 is to 2, that total it can store 4 elements, that is 2 into 2, 4. Here if you consider 3 is to 3, that is 3 into 3, 9 elements we can able to store. The elements of 2-dimensional arrays are represented in rows and columns. To identify any element, we should know its row number as well as column number. For example, here if I am going to consider what is the position of the first element, here 0, 0, 1, 1. Here once again 0, 0, 1, 1. The first element position is a of 0 is to 0. Now we'll explain with a chart now. Consider here we have rows as well as columns. This represents row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5. Here column wise, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, column 6. Whereas here if you observe, if I want to access this element, then here we have a of 2. Row wise it is 2 and column wise here. If I want column wise also here, if you observe here, totally here 3 here we have, that's why a of 3. Row 1, 2, 3. But when we come on the position, it starts from 0. For example, if I want to access this element, then a of 1 is to 1. If I want to access this element, a of 3 is to 1. If I want to access this element, a of 0 is to 3. That means first always starts from 0 and then ends with n minus 1. For example, if I want to access this element, then a of here 2 as well as the column is 1. Like this, we can able to represent the rows as well as column. The first one represents the rows and the second one represents the columns here. Always starts from the position 0. Now, how to declare a 2-dimensional array? Now you know the example, but how to declare that? To declare 2-dimensional array, as usual, first we have to write the data type, then array name, row size as well as column size. If you want, you can write row size or size 1, size 2 also you can represent. The row size represents the total number of rows and column size represents the total number of columns in that 2-dimensional array. Example, int a of 2 is to 3. Then how many rows are there? Here 2 rows, row 1 as well as row 2. How many columns are there? Column 1, column 2, column 3. How many elements it can store? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements here we can able to store. In this example, we have an array that can store 6 elements here, and all the elements are of integer data type only. All the elements of type integer data type only. The elements are arranged as rows as well as columns format. Now you have studied how to declare, but when we come on how to initialize, that is initialization of two-dimensional array. What do you mean by initialization? We can able to assign some values here. If you observe in this example, int a of 2 is to 3, then totally we can able to store totally 6 elements. That is 2 into 3 is 6 elements we can able to store. Here first one, second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth element. Then how exactly here the element will store in the depending upon the total number of rows as well as columns depending upon that position also. A is two-dimensional array which can store 2 rows and 3 columns here. 2 rows we have as well as 3 columns, and these assignment could be used here. First element present or stored in the location a of 0 is to 0, and then second element a of 0 is to 1, then a of 0 is to 2. That means, for example, if I have the elements, first one 2 rows and 2 columns, then 2 rows and 2 columns, column 1 and here column 2, row 1, row 2. First element position starts from 0, 0. First write down all the zeros, then 1, 1. Then write down in column wise 0, 0, then 1, 1. Then first element position is a of 0 is to 0. The second element position will be a of 0 is to 1. And third element position will be a of 0 is to, whereas in this case we have given a of 2 is to 3, whereas here I give the example for 2 is to 2 order. Then the third element will store on a of 0 is to 2. Then fourth one, a of 1 is to 4, a of 1 is to 1, a of 1 is to 2. There we can able to store all the element like this way. That means in this example we have 2 rows, row 1, row 2. And here column wise 3 columns, column 1, column 2 as well as column 3, column 1, column 2, column 3. Now first element position 0, 0, 0. Then write a second column, second row 1, 1, 1. We have completed the row. Then write on column values, that is 0, 0, then 1, 1, next 2, 2. Here first element 0 is to 0, then second one 0 is to 1, third one a of 0 is to 2, next one 1 is to 0, then a of 1 is to 1, next a of 1 is to 2. Like this we can able to store all the elements. Now how to access two-dimensional array? Now you have studied how to declare two-dimensional array, how to initialize two-dimensional array. Now you will study regarding how to access or read or print the two-dimensional array elements. For that, consider one example in a of 2 is to 3. Then we can read 6 elements here because 2 into 3 is nothing but 6. Into the array, we need to use nested for. Outer loop is for rows and inner loop is for column. What do you mean by nested for? Inside one for loop, if you have one more for loop, then it can be called as nested for loop. Whereas here, the following program segment here we written. For example, if I want to read two-dimensional array elements, then compulsory first we will write enter the elements. Then for loop will take here I equals 0, I is less than 2, I plus plus, and one more for loop will write. Whereas for the first one I will write I, and for the second one I will write j. Here 2 rows, here 3 columns are there, while in accessing or to read or to print, there we are using a of I is to j. Whereas this one represents outer loop and j represent the inner loop. Now in the same way, to print 6 elements, how to write? Whereas in the previous case, you have studied how to read. Now we'll explain how to print the two-dimensional array elements. On this case, first as usual we will write the array elements are. Then here for loop will take for I equals 0 and I is less than 2. That means 2 rows are there. Then inside this we will take one more for loop. Here j equals 0, j is less than 3 we are given. That means 3 columns or 2 columns, how many rows are there, that you have to mention. Then set w5 of I is to j. In between 5 space we have to need and then we have to print the array elements, then end of line. That means by this pattern we can able to print the 2-dimensional array. After first row, after displaying the first row, it has to be moved to the next row. That's why here we are using end line function. Now is it clear? Now we will explain one program to read as well as display 2-dimensional array elements. That is to read the elements into the 2-dimensional array and printing the elements. Now you know how to write the program. The simple block you have studied. But now we will explain the program. First we are starting with #include iostream.h. iostream.h is the supporting header file for cin as well as cout function. The next header file we are using #include conio.h. This is a supporting header file for clear screen as well as getcs function. Next header file #include iomanip.h. This is a supporting header file for set w, set precision. For that, this is a supporting header file. And we are starting with the main program, void main. From that, we come to know that this is the starting of the program. Here, we are declaring or we say that we have to declare the variables. Here, we are declared int a of 5 is to 5, then I, j, m and n. How many rows are there? How many columns are there? Then clear screen. In the output screen, enter the order of the matrix. How many rows are there? How many columns are there? That you have to input. That is m and n will input. Then afterwards, enter the array elements. Then in that, we will take I, that is rows as well as column. Then we will input the values. Cin a of I is to j. Then once again after that, the elements are it has to print. That's why one for loop will take, that is for I equals 0, I is less than m, then I plus plus. Then here, inner loop will take now, that is for j equals 0, j is less than n, j plus plus. In between we will leave 5 space and then we are printing that array elements. Then to the next line, after first row, it has to be moved to the next line. Then here we open for loop, that here we are closing. Then next finally gets h. Then afterwards we are closing the main program which you opened here. It means that in the output screen, how exactly it will display? First, in sample output C, enter the order of the matrix. Then for example, we are given 2 as well as 3. Then how many elements it can store? Maximum 6, because 2 into 3 is 6 here. Then enter array elements. 6 elements will enter. For example, 1, 2, 1, 1, 0, 1. Totally 6 elements we entered. Then afterward, it will print all the array elements. Now, is it clear? Like this, we can able to read 2-dimensional array as well as we can able to print 2-dimensional array elements. Now, the last one is multi-dimensional array. What do you mean by this multi-dimensional array? Already I told you, in 1-dimensional array, we have one subscript, int a of 10. Only one subscript. If it is 2-dimensional array, int a of 2 is to 2. 2 subscript we have. First subscript represents the total number of rows and second subscript represents the total number of columns. For example, int a of 2 is to 2 is to 2. Then here more than 2 subscript, whereas in this case we have 3 subscript. Then it can be called as multi-dimensional array. The array which having n dimension or more than 2 subscript is called it as multi-dimensional array. A multi-dimensional array is an array of n dimension. Whereas 1 dimension means only it may be row or it may be column. It may be row or it may be column. But in 2-dimensional array, it is a combination of row as well as column. When we come on multi-dimensional array, it is a combination of row column as well as multi-dimensions are there here. This is regarding multi-dimensional array. Then on this chapter, you have studied regarding what do you mean by array. Under that, which are the types of array? That is one-dimensional array, two-dimensional array, multi-dimensional array. In one-dimensional array, you have studied regarding how to declare one-dimensional array, how to initialize, how to access one-dimensional array, how to read as well as print. In the two-dimensional array also, how to declare two-dimensional array, how to initialize two-dimensional array, how to access the elements of two-dimensional array, that is read as well as print operation. Then what do you mean by multi-dimensional array? Whereas in the annual exam, you will get the question like how to read and print two-dimensional array elements, or how to read and print one-dimensional array elements, or how to initialize array, one-dimensional array, or how to initialize two-dimensional array, or how to access the elements. What do you mean by array? List the different types of array. Like this, you may get the questions from this chapter. This completes your array chapter. Next class, we will meet you once again with the new chapter. Thank you for all of you.